Growing up in Italy, something that was very big on Italian TV at the time was Japanese cartoons about giant robots, and I was a huge fan. That was an important part of my childhood. So if nothing else, for nostalgia value, I was very interested in the theme of Starship Samurai, a game that premiered at Gen Con last August, and that is where I picked up my copy. In Starship Samurai, players control clans or civilizations inspired by feudal Japan. You have starships, fighters, carrier ships, and giant samurais, and you go around the galaxy looking for planets to control. And of course, you had to fight for control against other players that control other clans and just had the same idea, also going out there and expand and exterminate around the galaxy. It is a 4X game. I don't know that all 4Xs are there. Also, when I think about a 4X game, I'm thinking about heavy games. Maybe this is a 4X Lite, 3.5Xs. It's definitely meant, in my opinion, to give you that kind of experience with a much shorter rulebook and with a lower level of complexity from what we identify usually as a 4X game. Now, I like space combat, I like civilization games, and I like giant samurai robots, so what can go wrong? Definitely I had high expectations about this game. Now I'm gonna show how the game works, and then we're gonna talk about whether the game exceeded, met, or fell short of my initial expectations. Each player's play area will look more or less like this at the beginning of the game. Each player has a board that identifies their clan by that symbol that also you use to store your available ships, you use to reserve and execute actions, and we'll talk about those later. And yeah, you place the cards that identify the powers and abilities and other things about your units. You have a carrier ship, which is identified by that miniature there, which has a power of 2 that is used in combat. And also, if you pause and read the explanation there, it tells you that when you move it, you can also move 2 fighter ships for free. Fighter ships are represented by those miniatures there. This card reminds you that they have a power in combat of 1, and also that you can spend wealth tokens to increase their power. Basically, when you are using them, if you attach a wealth token to them, now their power is increased by 1. So the power of that ship, for example, is now 2. That little symbol, that inverted triangle there, means powerful. So a fighter gains 1 power for each space dollar you attach to it. And then we have the samurais. Each player has 2 gigantic space samurais that have unique abilities, different levels of powers. These tokens that you see here, I added them because, well, there's quite a number of samurais in the game. And as you can see at first glance, they kind of like look very similar to one another. Maybe you can paint to differentiate them, but even if you do so, it's gonna be hard to tell or to remember which samurai belongs to whom. They could have used those like plastic bases that you snap onto the miniatures that other games use when you have generic miniatures that may be controlled by different players in different games. Here, simply add these tokens so you can use them to code the fact that these 2 miniatures, this game, belong to the blue player. By using the red tokens, we know which samurais belong to the red player, green player, and also we have tokens for the gray player, but I had to add them. So these samurais have unique abilities and a certain level of power. Now, as for the main board, actually before we get there, also action cards. There are action cards in the game. Each player starts with the same 2 action cards, which are these. One is used in battle, and the other one also is used in battle, but not to improve your battle, but to gain resources instead of adding to your power in the battle. And then you will gain other action cards during the game. You will add them to your hand, and you can use them to do stuff. They're very valuable. Then we have other 2 play areas, general play areas, where players will resolve their actions. One is 4 sectors of space, and that is what players will fight to control. There are different areas where you can place your starships. Each sector of space is associated with a planet. the players have found and they're trying to control. That is the type of planet, we'll talk about that later, and these are the rewards that you gain for controlling that planet. And so 4 planets will be in play during each round. Then we have a board that is used to keep track of the various allegiances. These are tokens representing non-playing clans, and you're trying to get them to be on your side, or in any case not to be on the side of the other players. You will use game effects to pull these tokens up on the track representing your clan. If you are that player, you want as many of these tokens as high as possible on the column of your clan. You can also use game effects to lower these tokens, which you will do, of course, to lower the tokens from the tracks of the opponent. And you can even lower tokens and then pull them up your own track. At the end of a round, each token that is in the column of your clan will give you a number of victory points. This one, for example, will give me 2 victory points. This is 1. Or also tokens there may give you wealth, or like we like to call this resource, space dollars. Now, the way it works, the game is divided in rounds. Each round is divided in 4 turns. Each turn, a player will use one of these tokens and use it to activate one of the actions on the board here. So when it's my turn, I choose any one of my tokens and I place it on any one of these actions. Each action has an X in the description, and the value of the X is the value of the token that I place there. So now if I take an action, I take one of my tokens, I take this one, and I place it here, then I can move one clan marker, which is on the allegiance board that I showed you, by 4 spaces. Or I can place the token here and move up to 4 units, or gain 4 space dollars, or draw up to 4 action cards. And maybe next turn I do this. Now I gain 3 wealth, and then I want to gain another wealth, and then I want to move 2 units. So you can choose the order in which you want to use your 4 action markers and also where they go. Basically, however, in a turn, you get an action, a standard action. You have to take an action. Then you can play 1 action card, and you can take any number of free orders. Once you're done doing that, which again will be usually either 1 or 2 actions, one the standard one, possibly a action card, the next player takes an action, again, basic action, plus possibly action card, and the other player another one, and so on and so forth. And you go around like this until all players took all 4 actions. At that point, you resolve the round, and there will be a battle royale, but we'll talk about that later. Now, most actions are pretty self-explanatory. Move allegiance, move 1 clan marker by the number of spaces, is what we saw earlier. You move 1 clan marker up or down and up. Here, this is how the moving allegiance works. Drawing cards, pretty self-explanatory. You draw action cards and you add them to your hand. Gain wealth, self-explanatory. You gain that number of space dollars. Moving units, this is a little more interesting. When you take the move unit actions, then you move the number of units either from your personal supply to an empty area on these displays here, or from one area here to another empty area again. There is no battle usual in this phase. The moving action simply allows you to move units in empty spaces. If units of the enemy are already there, well then too bad, you simply don't get to place units there. The only exception is the giant space samurais also count as units, so you can move 1 by using a movement here. So my 3 units, again, I could have moved this one, plus 2 for free counts as a single unit because that is the power of the carrier ship. Then say I move a samurai, and that's another unit, and then I can also move my other samurai. Now, the only time when you destroy stuff during this phase is when you move a samurai in an area which is already full, then the samurai gets to destroy one of the weakest ships in there. And the weakest ship would be that one because it has a power of 1. That one also has a power of 1. This one has a power of 2, because remember it's 1 plus the space dollar, and carrier ships have 2. Of course, these also are weaker, but I'm moving my samurai, so why would I want to destroy my own ships if there is another one that meets the condition of the weakest ship? But this is the only distraction that happens in this phase. So players will gain dollars, gain action cards, spend action cards to perform their effects. And maybe I can give you a sense of some of those cards. Again, not going to read them all, but feel free to pause and read the effect. Now, some cards are orders, and those are the ones that you use as an extra action before or after you take your main action. Battle cards, these only you use during the battle phase. So, players alternate taking one action, which can be move units, gain alliances, gain money, gain action cards. Player play action cards and continue like this until they all have taken 4 turns. Then the round is over and you have the battle royale, which means if there is a sector where only one player has units, that player controls that sector. And that player will get to score 5 points, will get the reward of the card. In this case, it would be to move that marker on the Legion's board up or down by 2. And then that player also takes the card as a trophy, and that may be useful at the end of the game. So simply you take control of an area if you're the only player there. If there are multiple players in an area, that is when you have the battle. First, you count the current number of power points that are there. So, for example, the blue player has 2 because of that, the 3, 4, the carry is 2, so now we get to 6, plus that samurai has a power of 4. That is a power of 10. The other player only has a power of 3. Not very good. Both players get to play a card with the battle indication face down. The players reveal the card, they apply the effect, which may be modified at total power, may do other things. After those cards have been played, the player with the highest power wins the battle, gets the rewards, takes the card as a trophy, and removes all of their units from there. The loser of the battle gets to keep their units there. The thematic rationale, I think, is now they're settling on that planet that they controlled, and these are the people who are still there looking for the planets in the sector. Whatever the thematic justification, it works in terms of game mechanics, because if you lost the battle, then you are there already, and you may have an advantage in taking control of stuff next turn. After you resolve all of these sectors, assigning them to players. If this was the situation, blue player would take this card. If this was the situation, green player would take that card without a battle. And then you will draw cards on this deck and replenish, getting ready for next round. Also, these will need to be moved because these players who won those battles and took control of those sectors. After you resolve control of the sectors and you assign the cards, you get to score all of these tokens, so you will get victory points and or space dollars for alliance, for clan markers on your column. And then you continue like this. You repeat until you have assigned all of the locations, and at the point the game is over and you have a final scoring. Now, the final scoring, players may get extra points based on how many types of locations they collected, and this is when that little symbol comes into play. If you collected 2 different types of locations at the end of the game, you score 3 extra points. If you collect the 3 different types of locations, you score 6. And if you have 4 types of locations, that's a really good set, you score 9 extra points. 9 extra points at the end of the game, like so. There's something I didn't mention actually, which is pretty important, which happens at the beginning of your turn. Should have mentioned it earlier, not too late. At the beginning of your turn, before you take your main action, before you choose if you want to play an action card or not, if you do have dominance, if you do have control in a section, you do in a sector, you do get the reward for that sector. So that reward, which usually is victory points and or wealth and or moving clan markers, you get at the beginning of your turn each turn if you for each sector in which you have dominance. This is important because that means that this reward will be paid out several times. It will be paid to the player that has dominance there at the beginning of their turn. It will be paid at the end when the battle royale is resolved and the card is assigned. But at that point, remember, also you get 5 points plus the card itself as a trophy to try to complete the set. Continue like this until all locations have been assigned, and at that point the player with the highest total, with the highest score, is the winner of the game. Now, this is not a bad game. It has things in it that I like very, very much. But unfortunately, there are other elements of the design that make it, I guess, less than it could be, make it a little bit disappointing. The things that I like, in a certain sense, is, well, the mechanics that you saw there, the very limited actions that you have. It's 4 actions per round, and you have to choose how much energy, so to speak, you want to invest in each, because if you're moving for units, you cannot get for cards, or you cannot get for movements on the allegiance board. So there is that scarcity of actions there. Action cards can be very good, and actually they will give you more actions if you have the resources that are necessary to play them, because to play a card you may have to spend space dollars, you may have to destroy some of your ships, or sacrifice victory points. So there is a variety there on the number of actions that you can have, but it's usually not many. That leads to tough choices and usually interesting choices, because the universe is a claustrophobic space in which everybody's elbowing, please let me, this galaxy is not as big as it used to, give me, I need some room, let me park my carrier here before your robot lands on it and smashes it. All of these elements, those tough decisions, are really interesting. The battles also are pretty interesting, because I don't know exactly what kind of cards you're going to play in battle, if you're going to play cards at all. I spoke of this as a 4X game, but somehow, for some reason, it also reminded me of a very simplified version of games, a Game of Thrones, the board game, which is, again, much more epic. And maybe it's because of the combat, which is sort of deterministic, based on what units you have there, plus you add a card, it's about clans, it's about allegiances. Maybe because of that I saw a little bit of a connection there. So I like what the game can be, but there are a couple of things that really bother me. One is in the production, and you saw that already. Those robots, they look great, but it's hard to tell which robot belongs to which player. On top of that is also, it will take you a while before you learn from the miniature, oh, the robot is a power of 6, the robot has a power of 7, or 4, or 3, etc, etc. What happens, okay, which robot is that one again? Okay, I think that is that robot. Okay, it belongs to you, but even which one of those two? Because even when you know the owning players looking at their card, and the power on their card is small, maybe is upside down from where you're sitting, so you know, okay, that is 4, then you have that other robot. That is, of course, having a good sense of how many points are exactly in a sector coming from which player is key, because if you are 7, well, I need to have at least 8 to win that one. So 1 point more, 1 point less, it's a big element. That means that you spend a lot of time counting and recounting exactly how many points every player has, and somebody makes a move, I'm going to destroy that ship, and I'm going to power up this other ship, and now I'm recalculating, and if on top of that I still have to go around and look at the robot cars to see their power, it just is distracting. I think they could have just written the power of the robot on each robot itself. It would have ruined the style by put here like a giant emblem 4. Of course, less kitsch fashion, write it on the base, mold it on the base. There could have been ways of making it clear from the miniature itself the power of the robot. I think that would have been great with the simplified things. Another problem, especially if you play with 4 players, is that the game is quite long and you can have downtime. And I guess downtime even at lower numbers of players, but of course with 4 it is magnified. Because the choices are tough, and so you're taking your time making them, and that is fine. Because as you consider a choice, you're counting how many points are there, time is passing. And there's just decision, and also it's because the resources are so limited, and it takes and you don't want to make a mistake, because a mistake can be pretty brutal. Again, since you don't have many actions throughout the game, then you want to consider those decisions before you make them, and that takes time. You may even tell players, well, you can try to plan ahead as the players are playing, but then the players will change the situation on the board, and then you're there again counting and thinking. You spend your main order, your main action to take action cards, you get 4 action cards, and you want to read them, because you may be able to play one this turn. And so, of course, then you can plan ahead until you see those 4 action cards. So now everybody's there waiting for you to read those texts of those 4 action cards. Some of those texts are pretty long, and so the first time that you play especially. The game is slow. As is, with 4 players, you basically play 4 full rounds, and I believe that by the end of round 3 we were pretty much like, this is where it should end. But then we had to play round 4, which again took quite a while. So it just feels longer than it should really be for what the game has to offer. And also, it's not just length, in which you're constantly engaged for a long time, it's length and downtime. You add the cumbersome logistics of having to recount points constantly. That detracts a lot from all of those other elements that I enjoy. So overall, it's a mixed bag for me. I didn't hate it at all. Mind you, I enjoyed most of the time I spent playing it, although towards the end of a game I tended to feel like I wish the game was over, I wish the game was a little shorter. It's a mixed bag. It has a lot of really good things and other things that are not so good. And so, in general, just so-and-so, my impression, my opinion is that, for me, this is a so-and-so game. In my experience, I felt like, no, I had some fun, not too much, middle of the road sort of thing.